Good morning. It is Wednesday, February 17th, and welcome back to The Advantage, where we take you through the latest in political ads and spending. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Ben. How's everybody doing this week?
So we have a couple of things to cover today. Obviously, political advertising is quieter right now than it was in the fall of 2020, but there are still things happening. There's still advertisers on air. The biggest, most recent story is obviously impeachment. We actually did a piece on this last week that you can read at our website or at the link below. But it was sort of a non-story in the advertising world. Certainly a huge story across news channels, across social media, but there were only 4 unique ads on air that referenced impeachment directly. And, this is really just a matter of the fact that it's not an election year. Impeachment was an absolute gold mine in 2020. We saw Republicans just go crazy messaging on it in the lead up to the general election, but nobody's up for election right now, so they really didn't need to message too much on, the Democrats impeach the president, or Democrats messaging on Republicans defending a corrupt president, or, all the messages we saw in 2020 were not relevant at this point.
And it helped in 2019 and early 2020 that Mike Bloomberg was spreading a message on his gigantic nationwide ad campaign that came up repeatedly.
He was responsible for an incredible percentage of impeachment ad airings.
Just an incredible percentage of all airings, really. But that's not to say that it didn't come up. Lincoln Project, for one, though they didn't reference impeachment explicitly, did run about $1 million worth of ads over the last month, most of which did not directly reference impeachment, but did target certain Republicans, McCarthy, Cruz, Hawley in particular, on kind of the actions surrounding January 6th and impeachment, and kind of called them out for their actions there.
That's what I think was the interesting dichotomy, is that the ads were not so much about the impeachment trial itself. It was the events that led up to it, and the alleged complicity of certain elected officials was really the message that was coming out of groups like the Lincoln Project.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We were looking back a little bit at the Lincoln Project, and they were the 20th largest issue group advertiser in the entire 2020 cycle, which surprised me. I think they've gathered a little bit of a reputation as people who ran a lot of ads to kind of bolster their own reputation, and not my place to say whether or not that's true, but they did run a lot of ads. They ran millions and millions of dollars worth of ads in 2020, and once you get outside of the committees and the PACs running in the presidency, Priorities, and America First, they're one of the largest kind of independent issue groups, and I think that's kind of interesting to look back at.
They're still spending, so Yep. We were looking at spending over the last 2 weeks, and they are the 3rd largest advertiser that's been spending any money. I think it was somewhere around $600,000, so obviously they are in the press for one thing or another right now, but so far have not been deterred from getting their message out there. Although you were looking at the market breakdown earlier, and it's largely Washington, D.C.
It is largely D.C. It is interesting, though. I saw some stats coming out that 9 out of 10 voters had decided who they were going to vote for before September. And this was kind of in relation to Trump's advertising freeze in August. But I wonder if their takeaway from that is you should spend earlier. A lot of the conventional wisdom is you wait for the last 10 weeks and you pour all your advertising in then. But I wonder if there's more and more studies coming out that show that you should advertise earlier. We see Lincoln Project doing it. We see DCCC doing it.
We're talking about spending early.
Yeah, DCCC spent $500,000 on ads targeting 9 Republicans a week or two ago, which is about as early as we've ever seen an issue group, one of the committees spend. And I think that's really interesting. They're targeting, again, on messaging kind of surrounding QAnon and January 6th, and targeting Republicans who flip districts that I think the DCCC probably thought they were going to be able to keep in 2020, but they clearly see is in more liberal areas who they think they can kind of target on some of the extremism that they're calling in the Republican Party.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'll be curious to see how the electoral roadmap changes, if it changes at all as we get deeper into 2021 and then into the actual election year, if the people that the DCCC is targeting now will be the same representatives that they're targeting in the summer of 2022. It'll be interesting to watch that play out. Or maybe they just figured, we're going to take advantage of the political climate right now, and we're going to hammer some of these Republicans on everything that happened on January 6th and call it a day.
It makes sense to run some kind of generic messaging in some of these larger markets, LA, Miami, Philadelphia, some of these kind of important markets that may be affected by redistricting, but if you can kind of get the name out there and kind of tarnish the entire Republican Party seems to be the way they're going, rather than targeting super specific representatives. I think it's probably an interesting strategy because, redistricting is going to throw the entire House map into potentially chaos.
Yeah. Well, Republicans are just kind of having a tough go of it on the air right now. There are obviously so many fewer advertisers, so that I think it really is obvious when certain members are being targeted. And Tax March has gone up in the last month, going after both senators and representatives alike. So they're having a tough time, these elected Republicans.
Yeah, there's a group going up right now, Opportunity US, I believe they're called, in Wisconsin as well, targeting Ron Johnson. So I think it's pretty clear some of the Republicans or the Democrats are really going to be going after and force Ron Johnson being one of them. We've seen a lot of activity in Ohio. It seems like the Democrats think they can potentially put that seat in play. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that shifts over time, or if we wind up with Florida and Georgia and North Carolina, again, just being the major targets.
Well, and I think one of the most interesting things that we've noticed in the last 2 years probably is that the cycles seem to just bleed into each other now, right?
Yep.
It's just perpetual campaigning and perpetual advertising. But the electorate's memory is still very short. So even though they are messaging right now on the events of January 6th, on tying Republicans to Donald Trump, all of those things that seem to have an impact on the political conversation at this moment in time, I don't know that those messages will still be resonating 2 years from now. I mean, I'm not going to speculate on how voters are going to vote in 2 years. But we know that that's a long time to get through. There are a lot of political things that are going to come up between now and then. There are a lot of policy decisions that are going to be made. So it really, I think, puts advertisers in a spot where they have to always be raising money, they have to always be advertising, and they have to always be shifting that messaging, because what they're talking about now might not be usable 6 months from now.
I mean, just look 1 year ago. Impeachment was the major topic then as well, and it seemed like it was going to be the major election, a major issue of the 2020 election, and then COVID hit a month later,
Right.
and impeachment was hardly remembered. I mean, I think some people probably forgot that President Trump was impeached in 2020.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say. I mean, hopefully COVID will be gone by then, but there could be some there could be some other completely unforeseen issue that takes over the press. So I think it does make sense, though, to kind of get out early and start kind of laying the groundwork for the campaign you're going to run.
Sure. So other than that, the airwaves are certainly not quiet, but they are quieter than they have been. We are keeping track of everything that is going on both traditional and digital media. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out to Ben at the email listed below. Make sure to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and stay tuned.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.